Yeah, we come to the Cribb-Lonsdale Award. This was originally named after the late Peter Cribb, who was a great conservationist for butterflies, but we've renamed it to include David Lonsdale, also really a master of conservation. So it's now the Cribb-Lonsdale Award. This year's winner is Nick Cooke, on behalf of a project to safeguard the pearl-bordered fritillary in the Trossachs. I'm very pleased this is happening. I know Nick slightly. Nick was, I think you were the treasurer when I joined, is that right? Yes, you're nodding. And
briefly, President.
Yes, well, I think most presidencies are brief. Mine, I think, is an exception. So I haven't seen you since you moved to Scotland, which was soon after I came on council. So it's absolutely wonderful to see you again. Yes, so thank you for all you did for the Society in past years. Well done for a superb article on how to do conservation. It's really thorough and it lays out for people exactly what needs to be done. Most of you haven't seen it because it's in the June bulletin. I've seen it and read it because I'm one of the proofreaders, but so Nick has done that article. Anyway, not for the article, but for the simply improving the habitat for the pearl-bordered fritillary in Scotland, in the Trossachs. We have an award for you. And I think David has the award. If you'd like to come out, I'd be very happy to present it to you. Thank you. Well, congratulations. I can only say very well done, sir.
Oh.
Very well done.
Oh, thank you.
Would you like to Would you like to hold that? It's a bit small for the camera, but perhaps.
No, that's both again. Yeah.
That's okay, just hold it.
Yeah. I'll get a bit closer, please.
Solidarity.
Posing outside and did your
Would you take that?
was it wet?
I've got a photograph.
Great in here.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to make sure everyone's got their eyes on. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Can I just say on a personal note,
I'll take that one.
Nick, if you could do it into the microphone, that
Oh,
would
sorry.
that'd be lovely.
You stand there.
Just to say on a personal note, Peter Cribb and David Lonsdale mean a heck of a lot to me. I was a young man in my 20s when I was working in London, became involved in the society. And here were these two individuals who quite clearly wanted to buck the trend. And I mean by that they firmly believed that habitat conservation should be given far more attention than it was in those days. Bear in mind, this was long before GPS, long before online recording, and it was very much their view that collecting insects and putting them in a specimen cabinet was not necessarily the whole answer if you really wanted to understand an insect. And that influenced me hugely, because the job I went to do in Scotland in 1978 was to run the conservation volunteer movement up there, which I did for 20 odd years, and then went freelance. And I often think that it was going out with Peter to actually rip up hawthorn scrub on Ditchling Beacon that had a profound influence on me. So now you've got a bit of back history to this. But anyway, thank you very much indeed for this award. I can tell you the steering group of the project that I've been coordinating are absolutely thrilled to bits about this. And we're going to be holding a press event on the shores of Loch Katrine fingers crossed, on the 17th of June. So now you know. Thank you very much.
Somebody could photograph.
Who lives in Scotland and is an environmental consultant. He was formerly AES president, 1975 to 76. And his talk is going to be about the pearl-bordered fritillary in the Trossachs.
Thanks very much, David, and good afternoon, everybody. As I said this morning, I feel a bit like Rip Van Winkle. It's 50 years almost to the day that I think I last had attended an AES AGM. But it's a particular pleasure to tell you about what I've been up to for part of the intervening years. And I just wanted to emphasize again what a great pleasure it is to be able to speak about this particular project. I went to Scotland originally to run a charity which involved people as conservation volunteers. Did that for 20 years, then went freelance. And my intention when I went freelance was to get back into entomology, Lepidoptera especially, having been a charity administrator for quite a long time. And so this is one of the end results. So I want to tell you a bit about this 5-star butterfly. Or I think it's a 5-star butterfly. It's a beautiful insect, only on the wing where we are up north for about 3 or 4 weeks at the most. And it happens to live, certainly as far as the Trossachs is concerned, in a particularly beautiful part of Scotland. It's a challenging insect to study. It's a specialist species. It has very precise habitat requirements. It spends almost 90% of its life cycle is spent as a caterpillar, hunkered down amongst bracken litter. And when the butterfly is on the wing, it overlaps with its close relation, the small pearl-bordered fritillary, which looks terribly like it. And many records have come to me sightings claiming to be PBF have in fact been small PBF because they have completely different habitat requirements. It is a species of major conservation concern. It's disappeared from about 90% of its former range across the UK. Scotland is much better placed because it was under-recorded for many years. And I think certainly if this project is going to go by, I think it's been overlooked quite often when it's actually been present. So north of the border, it's quite widespread, but very localized. And of course, we have a slightly different habitat requirement for this butterfly in Scotland, whereas down here, it's coppice woodland management that is the key. With us, it's bracken management, as I will explain. So this project began around about 20 years ago, when all sorts of people began saying that the pearl-bordered fritillary was extinct in the Trossachs. What we're going to do about it. And I got together with Forestry Land Scotland and the Butterfly Conservation and started looking around at areas for potential favourable habitat. So this is where we're talking about. This is Loch Katrine, and you can see mountains and hills, particularly the Arrocha Alps above Loch Lomond in the west. And this photograph is actually taken from a pearl-bordered fritillary site. So you can imagine, you can understand why I think it's a 5-star butterfly when you have this view to look at on a nice summer's day or spring day. Loch Katrine is famous for all sorts of other reasons. It's the birthplace of Scottish tourism. Sir Walter Scott's Lady of the Lake poem made the place incredibly popular in the early 19th century. Something like 180,000 people come here, and many of them go on a paddle steamer that you can now go on the loch. But it's also very important for wildlife. The Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park was established in 2002, and Catrin is right in the middle of it. It has particularly interesting wildlife. I won't go into all the details, but apart from pearl-billed fritillary, we've got a couple of clearwing moth species up there, which have only just been discovered in Scotland. So that's all very encouraging. The national park was followed about 8 years later by the formation of what's called the Great Trossachs Forest Partnership. And I'll say more about that next. So you basically got three major land management bodies, RSPB, Forestry Land Scotland, and Woodland Trust, who own 16,000 hectares of ground between them. And this led to a plan to recreate a Great Trossachs forest, which will be a kind of mosaic of native woodland and wood pasture and open spaces. And this would take about 50 years to accomplish. And this was based very much on what we think this area looked like about 400 years ago, 500 years ago. So this is the actual map of the what then became the Great Trossachs Forest National Nature Reserve, which was declared in 2015. It's the second biggest NNR in the whole of the UK. It's very large, and as you can see, you've got the three conservation bodies or forestry bodies who own almost the entire area. And it was really a partnership designed to prioritize the conservation of key wildlife species. It had BP sponsorship for many years. That's now been lapsed, I think, but the partnership continues. And pearl-border fritillary became one of the champion species under the Biodiversity Action Plan, which was then, I think, first published in 2013. So very clearly, this project is taking place against a background where conservation is taken very seriously and is invested in. So I became involved on behalf of my consultancy, Clear Services, between 2008 and 2017, initially to have a look at potential PBF habitat along the north shore of Loch Catrin. I'm not sure I can find the pointer, but there we are. I mean, you can see the loch is surrounded by FLS ground, so they became very, very key people. And it's worth bearing in mind that within FLS you have conservation staff who are responsible for biodiversity action plans. And then, so I was doing this with a few volunteers for about 10 years, and we came to the conclusion that if pearl-border fritillary was still here, it was present in very, very low numbers indeed. We saw one single specimen in that entire time. And there was then talk about a potential reintroduction program, at which point Butterfly Conservation then had a meeting with some of us and told us that they had been developing new survey methodology specifically for this species and the checkered skipper, based on identifying 10-kilometre ordnance survey squares, which contained favourable habitat based on a number of criteria. And you could actually spot which were the most favourable squares by a coefficient factor. So based on that information, we rethought the whole survey methodology. And from 2018 onwards, we set up a steering group of these three organizations, myself, and we planned a systematic coverage of the most favorable squares. This was coordinated by myself, working in conjunction with staff from the agencies, and it involved recruiting and training volunteers, many of whom came from the Glasgow branch of Butterfly Conservation. not very far away. And this is basically what we had achieved by the end of 2023. So you can see the cluster of 1 kilometre squares, these are, which in green show where the pearl-billed fritillary had been recorded. Other squares hadn't yet, but I can tell you that as of this spring, we've added another green square, which is NN4707, which is just in the bottom left-hand corner. So that map is changing all the time. And what we found over a period of several seasons was that the reason why the butterfly had apparently disappeared, quite simply, was that people had been looking in the wrong place. And they didn't actually know what the ideal habitat for this butterfly is. All that has now been resolved, I'm glad to say. We've got a very good idea of where you are likely to find PBF. It basically is south-facing slopes with the right depth of bracken litter, which I've mentioned already, the presence of dog violet as the food plant, and also, equally important, the presence of dandelion, primrose, and bugle as the key nectar plants when the butterfly is on the wing in the spring. And also, in conjunction with all those facts, microclimate plays a big part in this. This is a butterfly that likes shelter. It very often likes to breed immediately below rock faces, where there must be some degree of extra heat on sunny days. And we took a step further with all this by employing a field research student from Stirling University in 2022, who'd actually carried out some very interesting field research into the egg-laying choices of female pearl-billed fritillary. And she found that if you actually measured the temperature where females were laying eggs, they were on average about 5 degrees centigrade warmer than the surrounding areas. So all this was new to us, and obviously, based on this, we can now think seriously about management plans for key sites. So this is a map of where our records have come from. You will see there are basically 4 clusters. Victoria, where's the actual arrow thing? Oh, you haven't got one. Sorry, that's okay. Oh no, good. No, that's not. That's it. That's it. Yeah. So you've got one cluster here. All this area here is high ground. It's called Benvenue, and there's a beautiful sort of south-facing slope there. The butterfly is extremely abundant there. Then there's another one just down here on much lower ground, just literally parallel with a private road that takes you to the edge of the loch here. You've got another cluster here, again underneath quite a high peak called Ben Ann, and then you've got a 4th cluster up here, along the path, which is known as the Primrose Hill. We've now got management plans for all 4 sites, and I'm delighted to say that we have started implementing. When I say we, Forestry Land Scotland have now started implementing those plans, which critically involves bracken bashing at certain times of the year and the removal of Sitka spruce, the particularly mature Sitka spruce that are generating seedlings. And this spring, Forestry and Land Scotland have done a huge amount of clearance up here, and they're creating a whole new woodland ride, which will link up these sites here with these sites along the top here. Because the whole point of all this exercise is to improve connectivity between the different colonies. We haven't tried to guess the overall size of the population of this entire area, but it must be quite significant. Yes, just to say that the photograph is quite interesting. When I say that this project has depended on volunteers, it's also depended on the actual staff employed in FLS and Woodland Trust in particular. And this was one of our earlier expeditions, which was undertaken with 3 members of the FLS branch office conservation team. And they've been extremely committed to this whole project. So in total, we've now recorded, several hundred different sites across this area, and there is no reason why we shouldn't find more. We are still investigating 1 kilometre squares where the butterfly hasn't been recorded, but might well turn up. Last year, 2025, a single pearl-billed fritillary was spotted several kilometres away, just down the road in the Glenfinglas Woodland Trust Reserve. But we think that was almost certainly a stray wanderer, bearing in mind that the males emerge before the females, and they tend to be quite sort of adventurous and hunt out new areas and potentially mates. So I just wanted to close with a word about the workforce. Volunteers have been central to this whole exercise. We're very lucky to have an extremely committed and experienced lepidopterist as the chair of the Butterfly Conservation Glasgow branch. And it was he and I who actually sat down with the Forestry Land Scotland team to plan this new survey methodology. And you can see that in the top left, you've got a picture of one of our annual field training days, which I ran every May. And that photograph is a combination of staff and volunteers. And then here on the right, we've got Joe Davis, another butterfly conservation stalwart, actually photographing a butterfly, which you can see just up here. And then moving on to much more recently, this was the first practical conservation workday we did in November 23 on the Primrose Hill site. And you can see that we are removing Sitka spruce seedlings and raking the bracken cover to expose the ground to accelerate the spread of dog violet as a food plant. So I just want to finish off by thanking all of you in society very much indeed for this award. As I said before lunch, we plan to run a press event at Loch Katrine with a steering group later this month. We very much hope that your patron, Nick Baker, will come and join us. Nick is, as you may or may not know, currently up to here in the breeding program for rare ants in the Cairngorms National Park. So it's nice to know that your patron is still keeping his hand in, and he hopes to join us. And just to conclude, that's who the steering group represents. You've got Forestry and Land Scotland, Butterfly Conservation, Woodland Trust, RSPB, Loch Lomond and Trossachs Countryside Trust, who are actually more to do with promotion than anything else. So it's very useful to have them on side. And then very recently, the Sir Walter Scott Steamship Company, which is the company that actually runs all the tourist facilities at Loch Katrine, but now actually lease a large chunk of land, which happens to include 2 of these sites for PBF. So there you have it. That's the story, really. Coincidentally, while I'm down here in London, the Glasgow Natural History Society are holding their annual conference in Glasgow, and my colleagues have provided a rather nice poster all about this project, the Pearl-Bored Fritillary and the Trossachs solving an enigma. You'll recognise quite a few of the photographs of the slides that I've just shown, but it's very nice that more and more people are now going to get to know this and to appreciate what's been achieved. So thank you very much. Thanks for listening.
Any questions?
Not so much a question, but I would like to say thank you very much for the detailed article that you provided for the AES Bulletin, which goes into rather more detail than
Yeah.
you had time to in this this talk. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Colin. Yeah. Yes, that article was actually first published 2 years ago, 3 years ago, in a slightly different format for the Fourth Naturalist and Historian. So it was quite an easy job to write, to update it and rewrite it. Yeah, thanks a lot.
I was wondering if the butterflies would benefit from any captive rearing and reintroduction schemes.
That's been done elsewhere. Yes. I think it's been done in Sussex. I'm not quite sure. I think so. This is what we were going to do if this had not been, if this hadn't succeeded. Yeah. But once you start going into any kind of reintroduction program, there are so many protocols involved. I'm thankful that we didn't go down that road.
How does this relate to the distribution pattern of Pearl-Bored Fritillaries in the rest of Scotland?
This is the most southerly of what I would call the Central Highlands area of the country. So you've got other sites further north and further west, and just like this, quite small populations, but connected with each other. And there's also another big colony in Dumfriesshire. Oh gosh, what's the name of the forest? Brain's gone dead. But it's not far from Dumfries itself. That's interesting because this has been an area that is quite intensively forested and managed for forestry. But it became a butterfly conservation, butterfly reserve a few years ago, based on a management agreement between FLS and that charity. If you don't know the butterfly at all, it's a very good site to go to because it's very easy to get to, and if you get your timing right, it's very easy to see the butterfly there.